Smarter Service Talk.
This is the Smarter Service Talk today on the topic of automotive, and I have a real expert with me, Erol from Telecom IoT. Hello, Erol.
Hello, Bernhard. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Yes, today we really want to find out what the big trends in the automotive sector are and what the mobility of the future looks like and what exciting technical developments there are in the field of IoT. But maybe you could briefly introduce yourself first. What do you do at Telecom?
Yes, I am at Telecom, responsible for future services for the solutions that we will sell to our customers in the future. And therefore, I am positioned in the automotive business innovation sector. I have a small team there, and we ensure that we have the right future topics on the roadmap for the coming years, because today we make very long contracts with the automotive industry. And, cars are on the road for at least 10 years if they are well built. Therefore, we actually have to sell a solution that remains state of the art for the next 10 years so that we can satisfy the car manufacturers and their customers and owners of the vehicles over a long period.
Yes, I'm almost driving a classic car, so I don't particularly benefit from these possibilities at the moment. But tell me, what are the top trends in the field of mobility that your customers talk to you about, especially the car manufacturers?
Yes, so basically it's primarily about connecting the cars with a mobile network solution that ideally works worldwide without much effort for the automotive industry, avoiding article numbers and variants, but rather having a major partner who orchestrates the globally connected vehicle for them, but either alone or with partners. And we are on the move by building a large network with the Bridge Alliance for the Asian region, for example, and with our T-Mobile ES for the American region. In Europe, we are well positioned ourselves and work with them to cover all these areas around the world. Because the services that car manufacturers are now bringing into vehicles in a connected manner used to be more like, we do this in Europe. But nobody wants that I don't want to name a country now, but in some smaller country that the sales department of the car manufacturer considers not so important. Nowadays, the same services actually need to be available in all countries. And for that, proper solutions are needed. And therefore, we connect the vehicles and thereby empower the automotive industry to offer services. Digital services are, in the future, a major source of revenue for the automotive industry. Even today, data from vehicles is being read out and sold to weather services, traffic information services, map services, and fleet providers who no longer need to install hardware because they now receive the data directly from the car manufacturers without expensive additional retrofit solutions. So there is a source of income. And of course, also with all the service providers that provide entertainment and so on in the vehicles. We are increasingly moving into the area of feel comfortable in your vehicle, let yourself be entertained. And when we drive autonomously, then I also have the time to shift my eyes from the road to the screen. And there certainly additional services like gaming and videos on demand will play a significant role. So it will become more convenient, more autonomous. Not everyone's cup of tea, but certainly very important for older people who can no longer drive themselves, that they are driven in their own vehicle. So a new world will probably be opened up there. It doesn't have to appeal to everyone, but no one will be forced into it. But ultimately, it will happen that vehicles, through networking, will create much, much more comfort and new living spaces for the population. And the second important topic is we all want to reduce the number of accidents. We want to network the vehicles with their infrastructure also among themselves to ensure that they warn about cyclists around the corner, pedestrians, and that traffic light systems are more intelligently adapted to traffic conditions. So that's another new step. When the vehicles are networked, they will be linked with the infrastructure to improve safety, traffic flow, energy consumption, and efficiency. Electromobility is, of course, a topic that is widely discussed in the press. The automotive industry is globally focusing on electromobility. This opens up new possibilities. The vehicles have a charging management system. When they are connected to the battery, we can also perform software updates because the battery supply is secured. This is different with combustion engines. There you are inflexible. You can only address the vehicles when they are running because then the alternator supplies the vehicle with electricity, the battery. Because there's nothing worse for a car manufacturer than when a customer gets into their car and it won't start because the battery is dead, as we spent 3 hours downloading some software updates. So these are things that also give us more possibilities in terms of utilization. We can also, let's call it simplified, offer nighttime electricity rates and not just rates where we know there's the next software update on Monday morning for 4 million cars from a manufacturer, because that also pushes us or our roaming partners not to the limits, but we do notice that a lot is going through the lines.
Yes. Brave new world. Let's talk about something more mundane, namely the emergency call systems. So, what happens if I have an accident? What happens if I break down somewhere with the car? That happened to me once with the BMW. Yes. What does the future of such emergency call systems look like? And what is the current situation and what will change?
Yes. The topic of eCall is quite complex because, as you already mentioned, even if you break down, we have the so-called breakdown call. This is essentially the breakdown call. This is not as regulated, but it is actually an additional feature that car manufacturers like to offer for two reasons. Firstly, to provide the customer with comfort in the event of a breakdown. Secondly, they want to avoid the customer calling the ADAC. Then they appear again in the breakdown statistics. So there is a big struggle over the breakdown button for it to be opened up to third-party providers as well. Regarding the breakdown call, emergency call, it must be said that it is meant to save lives, and we are seeing it more and more in motorcycles, for example, with BMW, where emergency calls are triggered via sensors. There is the so-called regulated emergency call. It is mandatory in the EU and is based on 2G technology. And we've all heard that the first countries in Europe are making room for new network technologies and shutting down 2G. 2G is also quite expensive to operate, much more expensive than the latest technologies, which can be operated more efficiently. And there we face a scenario where vehicles that did not adopt 5G or 4G early enough will, let's say, enter a technological era that will eventually no longer be supported. The question is what the EU will decide regarding what happens to these vehicles when 2G is no longer available. To put it bluntly, the regulated emergency call will no longer work. One can now discuss retrofit solutions. One can also discuss whether network operators should be required to continue operating 2G to a limited extent just for emergency calls. Overall, it doesn't matter which network I'm currently logged into. There are, of course, many car manufacturers, and most people don't know this, who have a private emergency call system, saying, I offer my customers an additional in-kind benefit to this legal emergency call. For example, if you had a pre-existing condition like being a diabetic or a heart attack patient, then many car manufacturers offer you the option to provide them with this information. And if you have an accident, then during the emergency call, your location is transmitted along with the severity of the accident. And in your database, where the operator is located, they can see exactly who needs to be notified, what pre-existing conditions you have, and can inform the emergency services a bit better than the standard emergency call does. This is something that many premium car manufacturers have, as well as regular car manufacturers. And this private emergency call is also operated with private call centers. If the private emergency call doesn't work, the regulatory emergency call must always function as a backup. This is a big issue, and now we also see that new technologies are being added. As mentioned, the new emergency call is already in the starting blocks. We are one of the first network operators to allow customers to test live on our network via Volte, that is the so-called next generation eCall or Volte eCall, voice over LTE. And it is being tested to ensure that everything works well. And we also see the first use cases of satellite, where satellite, especially in regions with poor coverage, could be an option for services like transmitting a position or sending a distress call. And that is a solution we are currently working on. Satellite is not yet commercially suitable for streaming music there. So we're not talking about a Starlink antenna that I drive around with on the roof, but rather we want the customer to be able to use their SIM card and the satellite proposition or satellite solution to be an additional roaming network, thereby improving the e-call. So in the future, many, many improvements, a lot of technology that needs to be managed and orchestrated. And that is also our strength. We can do that. We can operate networks. We all have concerns about 2G. Something needs to happen so that we don't lose anyone and no one crashes without a functioning emergency call. I'm curious to see what the authorities will mandate. I'm curious about what retrofit solutions are available there or what we also need to do to still ensure basic services. I think that's still somewhat open.
How can I, as a car owner, find out if my car is affected by this? Do I need to do something myself, or can I confidently wait for the car manufacturer to contact me?
Well, I believe you can rely on the car manufacturers to come to you. Ultimately, you would need to find out through your model and year of manufacture what kind of mobile technology the car manufacturer has installed in this vehicle. It's also not the case that only one variant is always installed, but rather, depending on the price of the vehicle, different types of devices are installed. Some can do a bit more, others a bit less. So you really need to find out exactly what is actually installed in my vehicle, what kind of radio module. Does it only support 2G, 3G, which we no longer have, or a bit more? The car manufacturers know that, and they are, I would say, your first point of contact because you are the customer of the automotive industry. We are connected behind them. We then help the automotive industry to answer such questions.
Yes, then let's move on to the next topic. You briefly mentioned it in your introductory talk, software-defined vehicles. So that's the vision of the software-defined vehicle. Maybe you could give us your assessment of what is needed for the success of such solutions.
Well, in the past, people really only talked about equipment components like nice rims, a powerful engine, and a stylish interior. It was all very hardware focused. The car was a box that was built and sold, then it was gone. And apart from regular workshop visits and maintaining relationships with dealers as the automotive industry, there wasn't much more interaction with the vehicle. Now, a vehicle is built, sold, and the vehicle you buy today doesn't necessarily have to be the same vehicle in a year because it continues to be developed. And even when it's on the road, functions that are controlled by software, which have increased incredibly, are no longer frozen. They can be adjusted. So theoretically, there are also models where you might be able to download a new function for a fee. This is viewed very critically. Yes, I buy a car and something is latently present, but it doesn't work. Now I'm supposed to purchase it again. There are certainly supporters and opponents of such a thing. But it creates a life cycle for the first time where I sell something and then earn a service. We all learned it from Apple back then when they sold their phones and then made money with the App Store. In a simplified way, it will be similar with a car, only that the customer is not just the owner of the vehicle, but it can also be a fleet manager, a fleet operator, so business and commercial customers. You can nicely address which clientele is operating within my vehicle categories. Whether I sell a service vehicle, a convertible, or a small car, for every application you can come up with new services. And the car remains flexible in terms of software, state of the art, and we all know it from dear Mr. Musk, who always comes up with amusing things, and at Christmas you might be surprised to find a Christmas tree or other things on your screen. There are also a few gimmick topics involved, but it's very serious because we can not only introduce new functions with it, errors can also be eliminated when vehicles are built. Software is never error-free. You have the opportunity to transfer new software to the car with new functions, but also with so-called bug fixing, where software errors are eliminated or optimized so that everything works better in the future. For us, this is great because it's a major source of income, as these software updates are not exactly small, and the map providers also have to keep their map data up to date, and all the attributes that are placed behind the maps today include things like speed, what speed is allowed, is it a one-way street? This will be much more detailed with autonomous driving, so we expect that especially through autonomous driving and the preparation for autonomous driving. The topic of software-defined vehicle and the need for updates and new software in the vehicle will become more holistic and even more extensive.
Yes, there are also new regulations. Very likely, the car manufacturers are also affected by the Cyber Resilience Act, which will be enforced starting in 2027. In this respect, it's certainly good and important to be able to perform software updates over the air. And this connectivity, it comes from you.
Yes, exactly. And it is really very complex because there are also leased vehicles or rental vehicles where there is no one-to-one relationship between the car and the owner. There are multiple users in the vehicles. How do I manage it so that the data that is actually linked to me can move from vehicle to vehicle, regardless of which vehicle I am currently renting? But I want to take my favorite music, my preferred temperature, and ideally even my seat settings from vehicle to vehicle with my personal ID. And these are the topics that bring the next challenges with them. How do I recognize someone? And set up the car correctly according to their preferred likes. These are topics that make the whole thing a bit more complex. When we have new mobility concepts where vehicles are shared, leased, or rented, it's important that the right user finds their correct profile in the vehicle.
Now, you've basically explained that some of what happens on the side of the car manufacturers is technically similar to continuous deployment methods. This means your software is constantly being updated, which naturally changes the requirements for these over-the-air updates. What role do the new network standards like 5G standalone play in this?
Yes, 5G standalone is in a topic now. We have now already rolled out 5G non-standalone. 5G standalone is currently in progress. We are currently in the situation where we are discussing so-called use cases with the automotive industry on how we can market Pentium Arch and utilize 5G standalone effectively. And the topic of 5G standalone brings new functions that are relatively important for the automotive industry. I can guarantee a type of quality of service to a customer if they pay for it. I can provide and reserve things through slicing that are made available to certain customers because they have paid for them. And we can do better capacity management. So there are a few things that come along with it where I believe we can delve deeper into logistics. When the vehicles are on the factory premises, they can be loaded automatically through autonomous driving or receive the latest software update before leaving the factory. We need to ensure that there is capacity available. And when driving autonomously, latency must be present, meaning the response time of the vehicle should not feel delayed. It must work in real time, which is why the network needs to be very, very fast. And since the network is usually a shared medium, the more people use the same cell, the slower and lower the capacity becomes. And that's why it's so important to be able to reserve capacity and speed in the network for certain use cases. And this opens up new business models for us and reveals potential savings in, let's say, transport and logistics processes in the automotive industry. Imagine you have to load 1,000 cars at the port and have a huge team of students driving the cars in and out of the ship's hold all day. This will certainly proceed somewhat differently in the future.
Yes, keyword automated driving. But there's one topic we can't avoid me to adin, and that's AI, because it's essentially on everyone's menu. And how do you yourselves now use AI within your connectivity solution? And what services do you now provide to your automotive customers using AI?
For us, AI is particularly important because we can use it internally to improve our service quality. For the automotive industry, it is very important to understand analyses and the behavior of data usage in their vehicles, for various reasons, to detect anomalies, whether they have faults in the vehicle, or to recognize their consumption, which services consume something. And for that, we provide it to our customers so that they can more easily get an overview and perform analyses. And of course, we also detect anomalies to manage our networks and naturally to pass on the information that is important to the customer. So that's just a brief summary about AI. It's currently a huge topic. We will certainly be able to improve our technology and service with it, become more efficient, faster, and that is important for us when we have to analyze and interpret large amounts of data.
Yes. Then let's talk a bit in the last third about how you actually work with your customers and what solution contribution you provide. If I understand correctly, it's an entire ecosystem, not just within telecom, but also beyond corporate boundaries.
Exactly. The automotive industry naturally wants to produce as few variants as possible. So there are many country-specific versions. In England, for example, the steering wheel is on the other side, etc. And it's not like a layperson might imagine that we send a package of SIM cards to a car manufacturer and they can use them in Germany and another package in France, Italy, etc. Instead, the customer receives a SIM card from us that works globally worldwide. This has always been possible without any problems so far. However, we are now seeing that regulations are becoming a bit stricter. For example, in Turkey, you are only allowed to roam with a SIM card for a certain period. Then the Turkish government would prefer that you buy a local card. So we need to find a way that when vehicles are permanently delivered to such countries, the global SIM card becomes a local SIM card in terms of the profile of a local mobile network provider. And of course, we cooperate with these respective mobile network providers so that we can offer our car manufacturers a permanent solution from a single source. They only need to make one contract, and we orchestrate with global partners such as the Bridge Alliance in the Asian region and with our T-Mobile US colleagues in the USA so that customers there have a simple solution without needing 10,000 contracts with 10,000 mobile network companies. On top of that, we also rely on the fact that outside of IoT, Deutsche Telekom has many experts in T-systems who are knowledgeable in cloud, backend, and so on, working on the other side for the automotive industry. We are in the car, establishing the data connection, while colleagues are partly involved in the backend or cloud area, where the data is processed. We have a large consulting unit with Deticon, which also advises the automotive industry, and so on and so forth. And we try to assemble the whole thing into a solution package so that our customers have the simplest possible solution with one contract, one SIM card installed, allowing them to focus on other important matters. After all, connectivity is really just an enabler for their essential services. And we simply want them to have peace of mind with these topics and be able to focus on their core issues.
Yes. Then the last question, it's already noticeable that the keyword connected drive ecosystems is very much in vogue among car manufacturers. Why does it have such a crucial significance, and what role do you play in it?
I would just illustrate it visually. If you had a meeting with a German car manufacturer 50 years ago, the first PowerPoint slide would show a beautiful car from the outside with minimal gaps. If you had a meeting with an Asian car manufacturer, the first page would show the vehicle interior with a screen or a display from end to end, from the driver's to the passenger's door, and it was all about services. So the whole topic is very important, and that's why we are also looking very closely at the Asian market. What are they doing there? How far along are they? Which models are working? What can we adapt? Will this be accepted by our markets here? So the whole topic is shifting more from the exterior of the car to the interior. And we see that this issue has now also reached the minds of the executives who previously had no concern with it at all. For example, Mr. Winterkorn was simply an engineer through and through. And now the proportion of software and connectivity is so significant for delivering new business models in vehicles. It's obviously about making money. You don't just want to sell a car, you also want to keep the customer in your ecosystem after the car sale. And of course, it's more difficult if you've always driven brand A and are used to the services and you have your profile tailored to you. You would lose that if you now switched to another brand. You would have to register again and re-enter your power habits. No. If you prefer convenience, you stay with the brand. This is, of course, also a retention mechanism that you don't want to miss what you are accustomed to being offered there. And when you purchase a new vehicle, you simply take your digital package with you.
Those are good prospects. Dear Mr. Hall, thank you for the conversation.
Dear Bernhard, thank you for the invitation.